Welcome learners. In this session, we're going to talk about the producer and consumer problem. Well, this initially was solved by Netflix. And in fact, they were the first company who introduced this entire solution to the entire world. Because they found the solution to be very good, they found it to be adaptable into their technology, hence there came a point where they released different frameworks with RX. In order to understand what consumer and producer is going to be, in order to understand how to follow along with the state management, just watch along with the video wherein I'm going to guarantee that you will be having a bit amount of addition into your knowledge when it comes to the state management principles. Let's get started. Let's begin our session with a very simple example. Imagine we have over here our math trainer. Now this math trainer of ours is actually training a classroom on a particular math topic. There are 3 rows, or let's say 3 columns of children, and they are seated in this particular fashion. Well, now as the math trainer is giving the instructions, these students who are seated here are obeying to the instructions and then running down our math problem. Now, basically, this trainer then becomes an observable, and the students who are seated in this particular columns become observers. So, what's an observable? Something which would be changing. What's an observer? If there is an instruction coming from an observable, it will observe and do the changes. Well, why did I take this particular example? Because now over here, this is going to be my observable. That is, also I can put this down as my producer, and this is going to be the observer or consumer. So if there was actually consumer and producer kind of terms, why did I initially talk about observable and observers? The thing is, these technical terms will be frequently being used when you're trying to go into a reactive stream world. Well, what is that? You probably would be binge watching on Netflix. So Netflix, we all know it's a movie streaming company. But let me tell you the other side of Netflix. It's also a technology company. And in fact, many developers like me and you would aspire to work at Netflix. In this particular case, what's happening is Netflix was the first company who kind of introduced observable and observers. They found it so very helpful that in every sense it compensated to the performance, and then they introduced this optimal things which they found to be good to the rest of the world, and hence it's called as RX streams. I can show you any technology that will be following Rx streams. Let's say when it comes to Java, there is something called as Rx Java, known as reactive Java. Let's try Rx Swift, also known as reactive Swift. Let's try reactive C#. And you'll notice even .NET, that is C#, has got a reactive framework, and so do Rx Dart, which basically means there is no programming language or a framework that wouldn't support streams. Well, what exactly are we talking about is still producer and consumer. Now, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to hover to the top. Over here, I'll write a comment as this class is a producer for data, and in our case the data is tasks, which basically means if there is a producer, there has to be a consumer. So let me write this class is consumer, which will be reacting once producer gives data. Now we will find a common midpoint where these two can actually talk to each other. Hence, now I'm going to introduce to you to the concept of change notifiers. So let's say over here we have a task notifier that extends change notifier. So what does this thing will do? This class will notify changes of producer to consumer. So basically, if you go by the diagram, this was my producer, this was my consumer, and now over here I have my task notifier, which, let's say if you have one particular task, then over here let's say it receives a task by grocery. So this by grocery task will be transferred from here to the consumer, and vice versa. If anything gets deleted, we will be having the notification back to the producer. If this sounds a bit intriguing, I'm going to talk about it in detail while we are doing the coding now. Let's create my list of string. That's going to be my task list. Let's create pending tasks, and that's going to be 0. So what I'm going to do is add task, wherein this is going to take the task name, and then if there is a new task, I am going to add to the task list, followed by incrementing my pending task, and followed by notify listeners. What's notify listeners? Well, like I told you, once the producer gets the task to be produced, there should be a consumer who should listen and then display the task onto the screen. In that case, this notify listener will just notify that yes, there is a new task which has come in. Now, do you notice over here, I'm actually using underscore variables, which means these are private. Hence, what I'm going to do is list string, and I'm going to create a getter function, display task list, and then this is going to get the data from the private variable, followed by display pending task count, in which I'm going to change this to an integer, and this is going to give me all the things which are pending in my name. Next, when we go to this body, now I'll be removing this center, and instead I'm going to put one consumer. This consumer is going to look at the task notifier. Now let's put over here build context task notifier and widget child. Now what I'll do is create list view dot builder. Like you have seen while we were implementing the page views, a list view builder is responsible for displaying list. So what we're going to do is over here, one below the another, we will be displaying the list of pending task. Now over here I'll put build context int index. Mind you guys, when I am typing this code over here, I got a habit of remembering all the parameters, and that comes with practice. Just do not try to memorize each and everything. Instead, you can try to Google basic widget stuff and then try to put it into your code and see what happens. If you start memorizing, and if you're a person like me, we have limited memory, so you will tend to forget. Once you put the habit of writing your code, then probably the forgetting habit will go away, and eventually you will be able to do it much faster. So just do not be shy to be on the other end, wherein things are initially slow, or in fact very slow at your end. Don't be that kind of a lame guy who gets demotivated just because things aren't fast. Let's talk about the list view builder now. Now, this notifier had two getters. Over here, I'm going to get the display pending task count, and over here, then what I'll try and do is get the list of task items from the notifier display task list. So what I'll do for now, just display a simple text found pending task, and I'll put Let me take this and keep it over here. String current task. I'll put index and print the current task within the brackets. Let me run my code and see how does this thing follows. Now what I'll try to do is, when we are on add task screen, I'm going to go to the task notifier and add this task. Let's try doing that code. If you remember, we have this form wherein after the validation is complete, we can actually call that function task notifier, add task function, and then notify our consumer. So let me put provider dot off task notifier, in bracket I'll put context, and then let me just hover on this, take the import, and then add the task name. Well, how should we add the task name? I'm going to create a text editing controller, task controller. So let me remove the underscore and initialize my text editing controller. Next, what I'll try and do, in my text field, I'll put this text task controller, and then I'll take the task controller, do dot text, and add it to my task. The entire functioning along with the consumer widget is going to be a pretty much long topic. Hence, I'm going to take a pause in this video wherein we have learned about how to make the consumer, and in fact we made the entire diagrammatic representation of our entire app. Let's see in the next session wherein I'm going to talk about how to create the entire screen and have the communication between the widgets. Hopefully, in order to not have a lot of information dump into your brains, I decided to split this understanding producer and consumer into two different parts. In the second part, I'm going to discuss how exactly that task notifier that we created is going to notify and also make it adaptable to your UI in your entire display task list screen. In order to follow along, you need to stay tuned and keep learning with Hoping Minds.